Welcome to the channel Silent Ruptor 2. Oh, leave a like and subscribe for more such videos. Chapter 826. When Amara finished explaining, Evan's eyes flashed with a light of understanding, and he finally grasped what was going on. That elf bastard is also after the Nether Orchid. Evan spoke in a cold voice and used the focus in Hawk's eye skill to look in the direction the Hellhound was fleeing in order to escape from the golden flame. Through the combination of focus and Hawk's eye skill, he soon saw a small bonsai-sized plant with light purple leaves. Found it. Evan's lips arched upwards when he saw the plant, and just like any good-hearted responsible bastard, he immediately decided to steal it. But it will be dangerous for me if that silver head finds me stealing his plant and uses the same skill on me. Evan muttered while rubbing his chin, worried about the space restriction of the golden flame. Suddenly, an idea came to his mind, and his eyes lit up. Ha ha ha, it will be interesting, he said with a cunning smile on his face and looked in the direction of the sea of golden flame. A few minutes later, Evan arrived in front of the Nether Orchid. Master, make sure to collect it with its roots or it will lose most of its power. Evan nodded his head hearing Amara and carefully tried to dig out the plant. Because the Hellhound was already dead, Evan easily dug it out. The moment Evan dug out the plant, "Stop, you bastard, don't you dare touch that thing," he heard a voice filled with anger and saw Walter rushing towards him at astonishing speed. "But I have already touched it," Evan said in an innocent voice, without caring about Walter's enraged expression, and dropped it towards the ground. The moment Evan dropped the plant, his shadow shook, and like the mouth of a beast, it swallowed the plant. "Give it back." The moment the plant was swallowed by his shadow, Walter appeared in front of him and grabbed his neck. Evan didn't show any fear when his neck was grabbed by Walter. Instead, he lifted his hand and slap. The sound of a slap resounded in the area. "Release me, you piece of trash. That's not how you talk to your father. What do you think your mother would think if she saw you talking to me like this?" Evan spoke in an elderly tone as if talking to his own child. Whoosh, you mother F you cur. Deep golden flames burst outward from Walter's hand and engulfed Evan's entire body. "Arg, you bastard, stop. Are you going to kill your own father? Do you want to make your mother a widow?" Whoosh, hearing Evan, Walter's eyes turned ice cold, and the power of the flames increased to a completely different level. "Arg," Evan screamed in pain, and in less than a second, his entire body disappeared from existence. Walter looked at the place where Evan was with an ice-cold look and took a deep breath. But after a few seconds, when his anger subsided a bit and he realized what he had just done, his eyes opened wide in shock. "Fuke," he swore with a panicked look on his face and looked around him. "I forgot to take back the Nether Orchid from him." He remembered how the gray-haired bastard had put the orchid inside his shadow, and when he thought about it deeply, a look of despair appeared on his face. "I already killed him, does it mean I can't get it back?" he said in a panicked voice and thought about the second trial. "If I don't collect all 5 herbs, I won't be able to complete the trial, and without completing the trial, I can't receive that thing." A few thousand kilometers away from Walter's location, Evan opened his eyes and wiped off the cold sweat from his forehead. "Damn it, it was my clone that was burned, but I could still feel the power of that golden flame," Evan muttered in a low voice, but soon his lips curved upwards as he looked at the Nether Orchid inside his shadow storage. "I collected one of the 5 herbs that I needed to collect, and at the same time, I made that silver head believe that I am already dead so he wouldn't think about coming after me," Evan said to himself and looked at the other herbs on the list. "Now I just need to collect 4 more herbs without getting caught by that guy and it will be over," he said to himself and flew away from there. At the top of a rocky mountain, an eagle-like bird surrounded by fire was sleeping soundly. The aura around the eagle was that of a rank 2 mid-level monster, and it was nearly 50 meters long. Right beside the eagle, a small orange-colored flower was blooming, releasing intense heat. Suddenly, the eagle felt something, its eyes snapped open and it tried to fly away. But before it could fly away, whoosh, a small deep blue bullet tore through the air and penetrated its head. The moment the bullet penetrated its head, the eagle felt its insides freezing, and it became impossible for it to move its body. The eagle opened its mouth and tried to screech in pain and horror, but before it could, swish, a blast of icy energy erupted from its head, and the entire body of the eagle turned into an ice statue. The moment the body of the eagle turned into an ice statue, Brown appeared at the top of the mountain and punched the statue using its full power. The giant paw of the bullbear came into contact with the tough ice and boom, the ice statue of the eagle was blasted into smithereens, leaving nothing behind. Once the eagle disappeared from existence, Brown looked at the small orange-colored flower and walked towards it. "Thank God I successfully evolved Carnage and received the elemental bullet skill. Otherwise, it would have been a pain in the ass to collect all these things," Evan muttered in a tired voice as Elysia healed his hands, which were once again heavily injured due to Carnage's recoil. It's been nearly 1.5 days since Evan stole the Nether Orchid from Walter, and during these 1.5 days, he collected 2 more herbs that he needed in order to complete the trial. All the herbs that he needed to collect were quite special and extremely difficult to collect. For example, the flower that the eagle was guarding is called Ambrosia flower. It is a flower mainly used to create rank 3 potions that can enhance bloodlines related to the fire element. But the eagle guarding the flower was very difficult to deal with. If the eagle encountered a powerful opponent or felt threatened by someone, it would immediately self-destruct, bringing the flower to the afterlife along with it. If Evan wanted to collect the flower, he needed to kill the eagle in a single move so that it would not get a chance to self-destruct. The only way Evan could think of finishing the eagle in one move was to either use carnage by sacrificing a large number of souls or use his Death Guardian authority along with shadow possession, and without thinking for a second, he chose the first option. All the monsters that Evan encountered while collecting herbs were at the mid-level rank 2, so even with the help of his shadow undeads, it was not easy for him to collect the listed herbs. While Elysia was healing him, Brown brought the ambrosia flower to him. Evan looked at the small orange flower that Brown brought and smiled lightly. Now I just need to collect one more herb, and this trial will be over, he said to himself and put the flower inside his shadow storage. In just a few minutes, Elysia healed all of his injuries, and Evan just needed to recover his world essence and spiritual energy to return back to his peak condition. According to the information I received from Team Black, a total of 9 people had entered the cave before me, but other than that elf, I didn't see anyone, Evan said while rubbing his chin as he looked into the far distance. Currently, he was quite far away from the place where he saw Walter. After seeing Walter, he honestly thought he would encounter other people as well, but during the 1.5 days that he spent in the forest looking for herbs, he didn't encounter anyone else. Maybe no one other than that elf and I passed the first round, Evan said after thinking for a few minutes and stood up from the ground. He used shadow senses and connected his vision with a shadow undead. Through the eyes of the shadow undead, he saw Walter fighting against a giant snake. So, this guy is still trying to complete the trial, huh? Evan said when he saw a glowing green plant behind the snake. He didn't know what the plant the snake was guarding was, as that thing was not on his list. So my guess was right. We are both collecting different herbs, Evan mused after looking at Walter for a few seconds. Initially, he thought that both he and Walter were collecting the same herbs, especially since Walter was trying to collect the nether orchid. However, he later realized that this was not the case. All the herbs that he needed to collect required specific environments to grow. For example, the ambrosia flower only grows in high altitude places like mountains. Therefore, if Walter had to collect the ambrosia flower, he would have to come to the mountain area of the forest where Evan currently was. However, Evan was keeping an eye on Walter through his shadow undeads and noticed that Walter was actually moving in the opposite direction of the mountain area. Well, it's good that we are collecting different things since this way I won't have to deal with him, Evan remarked and stopped using shadow senses. He then looked at the list and sighed when he saw the name of the last herb he needed to collect. Amara, the frost vine we need to collect grows near water sources, right? Yes, Master, Amara confirmed. Well, it seems we have no choice but to face that annoying guy then, Evan said with a shake of his head and took to the blue sky using the shadow wings. Around 2 hours later, Evan was still flying when he suddenly felt something and looked towards the ground. The moment he looked towards the ground, a white light flashed, and a beginner level rank 2 bulky looking man appeared there. Who is H? Evan was stunned by the sudden appearance of the man, but before he could understand what was happening. Boom, the ground beneath the man's feet exploded, and he immediately appeared in front of Evan like a ghost, who was high in the sky. But Evan noticed that the man didn't show any kind of painful expression on his face, as if he couldn't feel pain. There is definitely something wrong with this guy, Evan thought with narrowed eyes, and he was about to attack again, but before he could. Whoosh, another white light flashed, and out of nowhere, a beginner level rank 2 elf who had the same deep red eyes as the bulky man appeared in front of Evan. As Evan was about to continue with his attacks, a white light flashed, and out of nowhere, a beginner level rank 2 elf who had the same deep red eyes as the bulky man appeared in front of him. After appearing there, the elf quickly looked at Evan with his blood-red eyes and slashed at him using his hand. Evan was already on guard when the elf suddenly appeared in front of him, so the moment the elf slashed at him, he immediately jumped back. The moment Evan jumped back, a sharp blade made of water shot out of the elf's hand, barely missing Evan who would have had his head severed if he hadn't jumped back in time. Why the fouke are all these red-eyed bastards aiming for my head? Evan cursed inwardly when he realized that similar to the bulky man, the elf was also targeting his head. After backing away, Evan didn't immediately attack the elf and looked at it carefully. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that the clothes that the elf was wearing were tattered as if he had fought against someone not long ago. Similar to the bulky man, his red eyes were completely empty. He could feel that both of them were still alive as there was still a life aura around them, but this life aura was very strange as if it was being influenced by something. While Evan was looking at the elf glanced at the bulky man who had already stood up from the ground. Seeing the bloody face of the bulky man, a gentle stream of water came out of the elf's hand and engulfed the man's body. Upon being engulfed by the water, the broken nose of the bulky man started to heal, and soon he was completely healed. Evan looked at everything without stopping the elf because his attention was attracted by something. Even though both of them are working together, they are not showing any kind of emotions as if they are being controlled by someone like puppets. Once the bulky man was fully healed, just like before, he once again shot towards Evan without even looking at the elf who healed him. Seeing the bulky man coming towards him again, Evan flapped his wings and took into the blue sky. At the same time, his shadow started to shake. Brown, he called out in a light voice and roar. With a loud roar, the bullbear came out of his shadow storage and faced the bulky man. Similar to the bullbear, the bulky man was also 3 meters tall, so when both of them clashed, boom, a loud explosion shook the surroundings, and the ground caved in. From the sky, Evan looked at the elf and noticed the elf was looking at him with hollow eyes, completely ignoring the fight between Brown and the bulky man. For the next few minutes, Evan didn't do anything and just observed the fight between Brown and the bulky man. Of course, he did not forget about the elf and was keeping an eye on him just in case he decided to do something. It's strange, after looking at the fight for a few minutes, Evan said to himself with narrowed eyes as he saw the bulky man's entire body glowing with an unstable hazy red light. It was clear to Evan that the bulky man was trying to use a skill, but the skill was not working properly, and the aura around the bulky man was becoming more unstable. For some reason, the skills of this guy are not working properly and he is fighting just by using his physical strength, Evan muttered in a low voice and glanced at the elf who was still looking at him without doing anything. Could it be that they can't use their skills properly for some reason? Evan asked himself, and looking at the elf who wasn't doing anything, he felt his guess was right. Because of the fight, the bulky man's body was filled with many injuries. Although he was stronger than Brown, it was impossible for him to avoid getting injured while fighting. But despite the injuries the bulky man suffered, the elf wasn't healing him. Just what is going on here? Evan asked himself with a confused look on his face, not understanding why the elf wasn't healing the man like before. Other than the skill issue, Evan noticed one more thing. Although this bulky guy is a beginner-level rank 2 core evolver, he didn't use his zone even once. Evan had asked Brown to fight normally since he wanted to know more about the bulky man and the elf, which is why the bullbear didn't use his zone, but for some reason, even the bulky man did not use his zone. He didn't use his zone. Because Brown is weaker than him, or could it be that he can't use it? Evan muttered with narrowed eyes and sent a message to Brown using his shadow senses. The moment Evan sent the message, Brown stopped attacking the bulky man, and the next second, whoosh, he activated his zone. The moment Brown used his zone, the surrounding area changed. A faint outline of an illusionary world filled with brown earth energy covered an area of 3 kilometers. The earth energy flowed throughout the area, carrying a formidable force with it. Under the pressure of the zone, the bulky man's body stiffened and he tried to use his physical strength to overcome Brown's zone instead of using his own zone. As I thought, he can't use his zone for some reason, Evan said in a voice filled with certainty when he saw the bulky man was not using his zone to counter Brown's zone. I don't know what happened to these people, but I need to be careful because turning rank 2 evolvers into walking puppets who can't even use their power is definitely not something a normal person can do, Evan thought aloud with a serious look on his face and looked at the bulky man who was struggling because of Brown's zone. Brown, kill him. Now that he already had basic information about the bulky man, he did not want to waste his time on him, so he ordered Brown to kill him. Hearing Evan's order, Brown's purple eyes gleamed with cruel light and using the power of his zone, he created hundreds of sharp earth spears that spun above the bulky man. With a wave of his paw, the hundreds of spears that Brown created started to fall towards the man like missiles. Evan watched everything without any change in expression as he was sure that the bulky man wouldn't be able to survive against so many spears, especially since he couldn't even use his full power. But, the moment all the spears were about to hit the bulky man, whoosh, a white light flashed in front of the man, and a terrifying aura that shook the surroundings engulfed the forest. Evan was stunned when he felt the terrifying aura, and before he could understand what was happening. Boom, he heard a booming sound and lost his connection with Brown. And both of them had a guess about the aura that was covering an area of over 100,000. The reason they entered the cave was because of the aura the cave was releasing, and both of them had a guess about the kilometers. If their guess was correct, the aura that was coming out of the cave was somehow related to the divine flame owned by Octavius. Honestly, there was not much information about this flame, but Walter and Moman had heard that the divine flame Octavius owned was at least at the peak of rank 4. Though many people say that it was higher than rank 4 and even had its own spirituality. The reason Moman and Walter entered the cave was because they wanted to get their hands on this divine flame. If they can get the divine flame which was once in Octavius's possession, their power will increase by leaps and bounds, especially Walter's power, who was specialized in the conceptual energy of flame. I thought he did not pass the first trial, Walter said in a low voice when he felt Moman's aura, but it seems I was wrong. He passed the second trial and was collecting the herbs in a different part of the forest. Suddenly, Walter thought about something, and his eyes flashed with cruel light. Although the possibility is not very high, I should still go and check out if he has the nether orchid in his possession, Walter muttered and flew in the direction from where he could feel Moman's aura. If he really has the nether orchid, I will take it from him no matter what. Moment hundreds of earth spears were about to turn the bulky man into meat skewers. Whoosh, a bright white light flashed, and a terrifying aura engulfed the surroundings. Boom, Evan heard a loud booming sound, and his connection with Brown was cut off, meaning Brown was killed by someone. What the? Evan's eyes opened wide in shock when he sensed the terrifying aura that was threatening to push him down towards the ground from the sky. He flapped his shadow wings to their full power to stay in the sky and looked down with a serious look. Upon looking down, he saw a sphere of yellow light nearly 1 kilometer in diameter spinning like a Beyblade. Evan narrowed his eyes when he saw the rapidly spinning sphere and felt his instinct scream in danger. Just by looking at the spinning sphere, he could tell that his body would be torn to shreds if he tried to get close to it. Now I at least know how Brown and all the earth spears he created disappeared, Evan muttered in a low voice as he watched the spinning sphere. Suddenly, the 1 kilometer wide sphere started to shrink, and its spinning speed also reduced. After a few seconds, the size of the yellow sphere was reduced to merely 10 meters and it stopped spinning. Just as Evan was wondering what was happening, boom, with a low booming sound, the yellow sphere exploded into millions of sand particles, revealing the figures of 3 people. Evan ignored the figures of the bulky man and the elf who fought against him earlier, and his eyes fell on a man standing in front of them. The man was wearing a full-plate golden armor, leaving only his face uncovered. Similar to the bulky man, the man was also nearly 4 meters tall, but compared to the bulky man, the aura around him was tens of times more powerful. My instincts are telling me that this guy is at least on the same level as the elf I encountered earlier, if not higher, Evan thought with a serious look on his face as he observed the man who had killed Brown effortlessly. Upon carefully observing the man, Evan noticed something and his expression changed. His eyes, they are also blood red just like those two, but unlike those two who are struggling to use their skills, this guy seems like he can use his skills without any problem, Evan remarked as he noticed particles of sand spinning around Momin. Suddenly, Momin lifted his head and looked at Evan. The moment Momin gazed at him with his blood-red eyes, Evan's instincts started to scream. Subconsciously, he activated the soul beacon skill and his body started to glow with silver light. As his body started to glow with silver light, Evan saw Momin positioning himself in a martial arts stance at lightning speed, and the next second, he punched in his direction. Boom! A loud explosion as if hundreds of bombs had detonated at the same time resounded throughout the surroundings and air pressure moved in Evan's direction like a cannonball. Holy Fouquet, Evan shouted inwardly with a shocked look when he saw the air cannon coming towards him. He was nearly 500 meters high and 2 kilometers away from Momin, but even then, he could feel that if the air pressure hit him, his body would definitely explode into a blood mist. For a moment, he even felt like his mind wasn't working properly because he didn't want to believe that the man who just appeared had the strength to kill him from a few kilometers away with just a single punch. But whether he believed it or not, the reality was in front of him because he could feel the aura of death engulfing his body as the air pressure generated by Momin's punch came towards him. Luckily for him, just before the air pressure collided with his body, he disappeared from the sky and appeared on the ground where he had dropped the soul beacon earlier while Brown and the bulky man were fighting. After appearing on the ground, Evan looked up and saw the air cannon continued to move forward, and all the clouds within a few hundred kilometers disappeared due to the pressure released by it. What kind of Fouquet up strength is this? I am 100% sure that guy didn't use any kind of skill and it was just his pure physical strength. Evan gulped down his saliva as he looked at Momin. If I am not wrong, his strength stat must be above 2000. Evan thought and cringed at the thought of facing someone like him. His current strength stat was just 95 points, and it was impossible for him to face Momin with his current power. There is no point in fighting against someone like him. Evan immediately made up his mind when he realized Momin's strength and his shadow started to shake. Whoosh! Suddenly, nearly 1,000 shadow undeads, including the wind and lightning sheep, Brown came out of his shadow storage and rushed towards Momin, the bulky man, and the elf. All of them used their skills and attacked Momin and the others. Evan picked up the soul beacon that was on the ground and gave it to one of the wind and lightning sheep who was standing beside him and ordered it to bring it away. Seeing the sheep bringing away the soul beacon, Evan smiled slightly and looked back at the fight. But when he looked back at the fight, the small smile that was on his face stiffened. What the Fouquet is wrong with this guy? Evan said in a shocked voice as he looked at Momin, who faced the attacks of his shadow undeads without doing anything. The bulky man and the elf both hid behind Momin when the shadow undeads attacked, and when their attacks came into contact with Momin, the giant didn't even flinch and just looked at the shadow undeads with his deep red eyes. What kind of bullshit endurance does this guy have? Evan shouted in a shocked voice when the attacks of his shadow undeads were completely useless against Momin. He could guess that the golden armor Momin was wearing must have very high defense, but even then, it was very shocking for him to see that he was completely unharmed after taking the attacks of so many shadow undeads head-on. Evan was still in a shocked state when Momin suddenly took a step forward. Sand particles started to cover his hand, and he punched towards the shadow undeads. Boom! A booming sound echoed out, and similar to before, powerful air pressure moved towards the shadow undeads, blowing away their bodies in puffs of black smoke. This is ridiculous. Evan couldn't help but curse when nearly 300 of his shadow undeads were destroyed by Momin's single punch. Looking at how easily Momin was handling his shadow undeads, he sighed and shook his head. It's good that I sent one of the sheep away with the soul beacon, he said, and a faint smile appeared on his face. Even if my shadow undeads can't defeat him, I will still be able to escape from here with though. Evan suddenly stopped speaking, and his eyes opened wide in shock because his connection with the sheep whom he sent away with the soul beacon was abruptly cut off. At the same time, just before losing his connection with the sheep, he received a message from it about the person who killed it. Well, Fu Ke, that silver-haired elf is also here. Fu Ke, is he coming here because of the aura this guy releasing? Evan said in a heavy voice when he lost connection with the wind and lightning sheep and received the message that it was Walter who killed it. I need to retrieve that soul beacon. Because the wind and lightning sheep was killed by Walter, the mid-level rank 1 soul beacon he gave it also dropped to the place where it was killed. Using the soul beacon skill, he could tell that the beacon was only 3,000 kilometers away from his location, and even if he used it to teleport away from his current location, Momin would easily catch up with him using his high stat points. Moreover, now along with Momin, the bulky man, and the elf who were looking at him with their red eyes, he also had to deal with Walter. In the literal sense, his situation was completely messed up. He couldn't escape from Momin using normal means as even his shadow undeads were not able to stop the giant whose endurance and strength were far higher than his. And if he tries to escape using the soul beacon that the wind and lightning sheep dropped, Walter, who killed the sheep, will immediately notice him. Boom. While Evan was thinking about his next course of action, Momin and others destroyed all the shadow undead that he released earlier. At the same time, a silver-haired elf appeared above them. When Walter appeared at the scene, the eyes of Momin and others immediately shifted towards him. Feeling 3 cold gazes, especially the gaze of Momin on him, Walter felt a chill run down his spine and looked at them with a shocked expression. What happened to them? He asked himself with a look of disbelief as he looked at the red eyes of Momin and others because he could immediately tell that there was something wrong with them. Suddenly, Walter felt another presence, and when he turned his head a little, he saw a gray-haired lazy-looking man. Seeing the lazy-looking face of the man, Walter's eyes widened. He pointed his finger at Evan and asked in a shocked-filled voice. How are you still alive? But suddenly, he thought about the nether orchid and his eyes turned cold. No, it doesn't matter how you survived. Before Evan could answer, Walter spoke, and his golden eyes began to glow menacingly, and similar to Momin, a frightening aura came out of his body. If you don't want to die a second time, give me the nether orchid. Walter said, and a deep red-colored bow appeared in his hand. What the Fu Ke should I do now? Evan ignored what Walter said and asked himself with a deep frown on his face. Not to mention the 3 red-eyed lunatics, now even the silver-haired elf was after him. Wait a second. Suddenly, Evan noticed another anomaly. Why are these red-eyed bastards not attacking this guy? Before Walter arrived, Momin and others were fighting against his shadow undeads, and after destroying them, they were ready to attack Evan but stopped because of the sudden arrival of Walter. Looking at Momin and others who were staring at Walter as if evaluating something, he felt something was not right. Don't tell me these guys are here especially for me and won't attack this silver-haired guy as long as he doesn't provoke them. And Evan's guess turned out to be right because the moment Momin and others saw Walter looking at Evan with killing intent, they stopped staring at him and focused back on Evan. Well, Fu Ke. This was the only thought that came into Evan's mind when he felt the aura of all 4 people come crashing down on him. After restricting his movements using their auras, all 4 people shot towards him. Evan activated temporal velocity, and his perception of time slowed down. His mind worked at the speed of a supercomputer as he watched 4 people coming towards him, especially Walter and Momin, who were faster than the bulky man and the elf. I can't stop them using my shadow undeads. Evan immediately eliminated the thought of using his shadow undeads to stop Momin and Walter, as he had already seen how Momin crushed his shadow undeads with sheer might. Moreover, unlike Momin, who was not in the right state of mind, Walter was in a completely sane state, and if he released thousands of shadow undeads, Walter would immediately connect him to the Shadow Monarch. Elves were one of the top factions of Utopia, and Evan could tell that Walter's background was not normal, so it was highly likely that he knew many things about the Shadow Monarch. A few of the shadow undeads were fine as they wouldn't attract too much attention, but using thousands of them when he wasn't sure he would be able to kill Walter was a big no for him. After eliminating the option of shadow undeads, he thought about using shadow possession and death guardian authority. But he eliminated this option as well because the 5-second time limit wasn't enough for him to take care of everything. Walter and Momin were far stronger than any peak rank 2 core evolver he had ever encountered, so he was sure that the 5 seconds he would receive using Death Guardian authority would not be enough to handle both of them. Forget about taking care of them, he wasn't even sure if he could escape using those 2 abilities. Even after using the Death Guardian authority and Shadow Possession, his stat points wouldn't exceed 2,000, so it was not guaranteed that he would be able to escape from here. Guess, I will have to use that. Evan sighed when he wasn't able to find any solution and thought about something that he didn't want to use. Although he did not want to use this skill, he knew he had no choice. Seeing Momin and Walter were about to reach him, he stopped thinking about it and made up his mind. While still using temporal velocity, Evan took a deep breath and the void energy inside his core started to move. Slowly, a transparent bubble made of void energy started to come out of his body with Evan at its center, and its size started to increase at the speed of light. In slow motion, Evan watched as Momin, Walter, and the others were caught inside the bubble. The moment they were caught inside, Evan's black eyes flashed with dark purple energy and he opened his mouth. Void Seal. When Evan's understanding of void energy reached 20%, he comprehended his third void skill. Unlike his first void skill, Void Break, or the second skill, Void Senses, the third skill he comprehended was very different. Although he already understood the basics of this skill, he still couldn't control it properly, which is why he didn't want to use it. But in his current situation, he couldn't think of anything other than this skill to get away from Momin, Walter, and the others. Void Seal. As Evan used the skill, a transparent bubble made of void energy started to cover the surroundings with Evan at its center. Just like the bulky man and the elf, Momin was also not in the right state of mind, but Walter was in a completely sane state, and a forbidden feeling engulfed his body when he saw the transparent purple bubble coming out of Evan's body. He had complete trust in his senses, so the moment he felt something was not right, he immediately decided to back away. But to his shock, the bubble that came out of Evan's body suddenly expanded and covered an area of 200 meters in an instant. Walter didn't even see how the bubble expanded to a 2-kilometer area. He felt as if the bubble traveled through the void and engulfed all of them. And the moment he was caught inside the bubble, Walter felt a foreign energy invade his body in the next second. Thud, he lost all the energy inside his body and dropped to the ground. Thud, 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 3 more sounds rang out, and Walter saw Momin and the others, who were rushing towards Evan, also drop to the ground. What the he? Walter stopped speaking midway when he tried to stand up and felt his body was weak. Very, very weak. It was as if all of his powers were stripped away from him, and he became a normal person. His physical strength, his spiritual power, his world essence, his conceptual energy. Everything was sealed. Feeling the condition of his body, Walter felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that he had become a completely normal person. His core was sealed by a strange purple energy, preventing him from using his powers. He looked at Momin and the others and realized that similar to him, they also lost their powers. Fu K, I don't know what he did, but in our current condition, he can easily kill all of us. Walter thought with an alarmed look on his face and turned his head in Evan's direction. But when he looked in Evan's direction, his mouth opened wide in shock. The Fu K, he shouted with a startled look when he saw Evan lying on the ground with a stiff look on his face. Unlike Momin and the others who only had their powers sealed, it was as if Evan's whole body was sealed, and he couldn't even move his finger. What kind of sick skill is this? Walter muttered with a strange look on his face when he saw Evan lying on the floor with a stiffened expression. Damn, that's why I didn't want to use this skill. Evan cursed inwardly as he felt the side effects of the skill and couldn't move his body anymore. Suddenly, his shadow started to shake and a giant bird with a chicken head and the body of a wyvern emerged from his shadow storage, lifting him onto its back. The moment Rocky emerged from the shadow storage, similar to Momin and others, he was also affected by the Void Seal skill and his powers were sealed. However, it didn't matter to Rocky as after picking away Evan on his back, he flapped his wings and flew away from there. Walter's eyes widened when he saw this scene, and he quickly ran after Rocky. Stop, give me the nether orchid before you leave, he shouted in a desperate voice as it was the only thing he needed to complete the second trial. But Rocky didn't stop just because Walter asked and continued to fly away. With his powers sealed and unable to use his world essence, Walter could only watch as Rocky carried Evan away from him. Just when he was feeling depressed, he saw Rocky suddenly dive down from the sky and enter the forest. Walter was confused when he saw this, but the next second, his expression changed because he felt the purple energy restricting his powers disappear, and he regained his strength. Fu Ke, considering he was just a mid-level rank 1 core evolver, I should have already guessed that he wouldn't be able to restrict my powers for long. Walter cursed when he realized this crucial fact, and his spiritual senses immediately exploded outwards, covering tens of thousands of kilometers in an instant. Through his spiritual senses, he saw Evan running away on the back of a sheep that he killed earlier. The restrictions Evan placed on Walter and others using all of his void energy lasted less than 4 seconds, so even though he ran away earlier, he was still less than 100 kilometers away from Walter and the others, which was practically nothing for a peak rank 2 core evolver. But suddenly, through his spiritual senses, Walter saw Evan's body glowing with silver light and he disappeared. As his spiritual senses covered a large range of area, Walter saw Evan appearing at the place where he killed the sheep earlier. That's a strange teleportation skill. Walter muttered with a voice filled with interest when he saw Evan teleport a few thousand kilometers away, but he did not care too much about it because Evan was still within the range of his spiritual senses, and as long as he was within the range of his senses, Walter was sure that it wouldn't be difficult for him to catch Evan using his high agility. Similar to Walter, Momin and the others also regained their power, and Momin also found Evan using his spiritual senses. After finding Evan, Momin quickly bolted in his direction. The bulky man and the elf with red eyes tried to follow after Momin, who was running toward Evan while destroying the forest. Walter was curious about the state of Momin and the others, but his current priority was to take the nether orchid from Evan, so he didn't think too much about it and took into the blue sky using fire wings and chased after Evan. While Walter, Momin, and the others chased after the wind and lightning sheep who was carrying Evan, a man the size of a mosquito hid atop a tree within the forest. The man's body was transparent as if he was invisible, and upon seeing Walter and the others flying away, he sighed in relief. The small man had sharp elf-like ears and a handsome face which was still a bit stiff due to using a certain skill earlier. After Walter and the others disappeared from his sight, the man immediately flew in the opposite direction. Despite being the size of a mosquito, the speed at which the man flew was no lower than that of a normal beginner-level rank 2 core evolver. The man who was running away was obviously Evan, and as for his body size, he changed it using Necromancer's unique skill, size manipulation. Just as this skill could increase body size, it could also be used in the opposite way. After all, the name of the skill was size manipulation, not gigantification. However, Evan didn't enjoy the feeling of reducing his size to that of a mosquito. After all, no one in their right mind would want to shrink their body size to that of a mosquito. Moreover, reducing his body size was quite taxing. Even using all of his world essence, he couldn't maintain this size for more than 3 minutes. And in order to hide his presence, he was even using the invisibility effect of the Shadow Walk skill, so this time was reduced even more. Normally, Walter and Momin would have easily seen through the invisibility effect of Shadow Walk with their high spiritual power. But because of the distraction Evan caused by using his shadow clone and reducing his size to that of a mosquito, he successfully hid himself from Walter and Momin. As he fled, Evan even used temporal velocity to increase his agility because he knew that it wouldn't take long for Walter and Momin to catch his clone. Once they caught his clone, they would immediately realize the truth, and before they found out the truth, he wanted to get as far away as possible. He could have used a wind and lightning sheep, which was a lot faster than him, but if he used a shadow undead, Walter and Momin would immediately notice it through their spiritual senses. So, the best course of action for him was to run using his own powers. Evan ran for around 1 minute when he suddenly received a message from his clone, and the next second, he lost his connection with it. That was fast, Evan thought inwardly when Walter caught his clone in just 1 minute. Through the last location of his clone, he could tell that he was nearly 15,000 kilometers away from Walter and Momin, and this distance was still within the range of their spiritual senses. I am about to run out of world essence. Evan pushed his body to its limit as he tried to run even faster to increase the distance. A few more seconds passed, and suddenly Evan felt 2 powerful spiritual senses spreading in the surroundings. They already realized it was a clone, huh? Evan narrowed his eyes when he felt Momin and Walter's spiritual senses and hoped that the invisibility effect of the Shadow Walk skill, his small size, and the large distance between them would work, and Walter and Momin would not be able to find him. The spiritual senses of the giant and the elf continued to spread outwards, and Evan sighed in relief when he noticed they were not trying to scan him. 20%. Evan looked at his remaining world essence, and considering all the skills that he was using, he realized that he would run out of it in less than a minute. He can use the primordial shadow energy if he runs out of the world essence, but shadow energy is way more intense than the world essence, and the chances of Momin and Walter being able to feel the energy fluctuations of primordial shadow energy are very high. It's good that they are using their spiritual senses without moving from their location. If they searched for me while moving in the direction I am running, it would have been impossible for me to run away from them. Evan thought as he noticed he was just a few hundred kilometers away from getting out of the range of Momin and Walter's spiritual senses. Just before he ran out of his world essence, Evan successfully escaped from the range of their spiritual senses, and the moment he left the range, he immediately summoned a wind and lightning sheep who carried him on its back and bolted away from there. Evan's body returned to its original size, and he glanced back with a pale face as the sheep continued to move away. That was fucking dangerous, Evan said in a tired voice as he realized how dangerous his situation would have been if he couldn't have escaped from Walter and Momin. Even with the help of his shadow undeads, his skills, and authorities, he would not have been able to beat them. It's all because my rank is too low. Evan clenched his fists tightly as he realized his weakness. If his rank was high enough, he could have created higher ranked shadow undeads, but because of the limitations of his rank, he can't create shadow undeads higher than the beginner level rank 2. Although my core is progressing at very fast speed, it is not enough. I need to reach the peak of rank 1 as soon as possible so that I can create higher level shadow undeads, Evan said in a determined voice as his eyes glowed ominously. Soon, he took a deep breath to calm down and started to recover his world essence. I just need to collect one more herb, he said in a deep voice and looked at the far distance. Let's finish this trial as soon as possible and get out of here. Riding the wind and lightning sheep, Evan headed toward a certain direction. The last thing he needed to collect in order to complete the second trial was the frost vine, which grows near water sources. Evan had spent 1.5 days collecting the other herbs on the list, and during that time, he had come across a water source. However, he didn't try to collect the frost vine at that time because the water source was being protected by a peak rank 2 monster, and that monster was quite troublesome to deal with. About 5 hours after escaping from the range of Walter and Momin's spiritual senses, Evan saw a small lake in the distance. It won't be easy to take down that bastard, Evan muttered in a low voice as he thought about the monster of the lake. Though I didn't search around the lake, I already know where the frost vine is, Evan said to himself as his eyes glowed brightly. Soon, the wind and lightning sheep stopped at the edge of the lake. The lake was a few kilometers wide, and there was a small island in the middle of it. Evan was 110% sure that the frost vine was on that island. Why was he sure? Well, using the hawk's eye skill, he could see an ice blue vine growing in the middle of the island, and when he told Amara about it, she confirmed that it was the thing they were looking for. As expected, it is not going to be easy, Evan sighed because of the location of the vine and took a deep breath. He didn't immediately jump into the water and move towards the island because he knew that entering the lake without preparation was like entering the lion's den. For the next 10 minutes, he considered many things and finally thought of a way to kill the monster of the lake without using his authority, Death Guardian and skill Shadow Possession. Although the chances of success are not 100%, it is worth a try, Evan muttered in a low voice as his shadow started to shake. For the first time after entering the tomb, Evan released all of his shadow undeads. As the army of thousands of shadow undeads appeared outside of the lake, an aura of death spread in all directions. As the aura of death engulfed the surroundings, the water of the lake started to churn, and Evan noticed 2 deep yellow eyes the size of basketballs looking at him and his shadow undeads from the depth of the water. Evan's smile grew unnaturally when he saw the cold deep yellow eyes, and he gave only one order to all of his shadow undeads: wreak havoc. Hearing Evan's order, the purple burning eyes of the shadow undeads gleamed ominously, and their auras exploded outward, shaking the entire lake. The yellow eyes that were looking at Evan and his shadow undeads narrowed when the aura of the shadow undeads covered the entire lake in the next second. Roar! With a thunderous roar, a giant turtle emerged from the depths of the lake, and the island in the middle of the lake was covered in a sphere of water, preventing anyone from reaching it. The turtle was around 100 meters tall and 40 meters long, had deep yellow eyes, and was covered in a tough-looking black diamond-shaped shell. A 10-meter-long tail, covered in sharp spikes, was coming out of its back, and its face and 4 legs were covered in dragon-like scales. Looking at the giant black turtle staring at him and his shadow undeads with cold eyes, Evan couldn't help but shudder a bit. Although the aura of the turtle was a bit weaker than Momin and Walter's auras, it was still something Evan couldn't ignore. Moreover, Evan was wary of the turtle for a completely different reason. As the turtle appeared in the middle of the water, Evan's shadow undeads attacked it using their skills. The entire lake started to shake because of the attacks of his shadow undeads, but the yellow eyes of the turtle glowed a bit, and the lake returned to its calm state. At the same time, the attacks of the shadow undeads came into contact with the turtle, resulting in a loud explosion that shook the surroundings and illuminated the entire lake area with different shades of colors due to the combined attacks. As expected from a turtle bastard, Evan said in a neutral voice as he looked at a diamond-shaped light blue shield that appeared in front of the turtle and stopped all the attacks. The shield was visibly cracked in many places due to the attacks of the shadow undeads, but the water of the lake suddenly moved towards the shield, and all the cracks on it started to disappear. Some shadow undeads, including Aqua, jumped into the water to attack the turtle from underwater, but the moment they jumped, the water came to life and tore their bodies to shreds as if the lake was a forbidden place where anyone who entered would die. It has a ridiculous defense, can control the water of the lake, and most importantly, Evan used the Eyes of the Abyss ability of Gobu and saw that the world essence of the lake was continuously being absorbed by the turtle. As long as this guy is inside the lake, it has an unlimited supply of world essence. Evan took a deep breath and used the second effect of the Growth Link skill to take Albalu's skill. Blood lightning started to cover his body, and a bloodthirsty aura started to emanate from him. Continue your attacks, don't stop no matter what, he said to his shadow undeads and shot high into the sky, leaving behind a trail of blood lightning. Following Evan's order, the shadow undeads once again attacked the turtle, but just like before, all of their attacks were stopped by the turtle using its skill and the power of the lake. Evan stopped high in the sky for a moment, and after seeing the attacks of his shadow undeads were still not working, he took a deep breath and shot towards the heaven, leaving behind a trail of blood lightning in the middle of the sky. 1,000 meters, 5,000 meters, 10,000 meters, 20,000 meters, Evan continued to ascend high in the sky, leaving behind a trail of blood lightning. As he passed through different layers of the atmosphere, the temperature around him started to decrease. When he reached 20,000 meters, even with his powerful body, he started to feel a little cold. But he could easily endure such cold, so he did not stop and continued to move. 25,000 meters, 35,000 meters. When he reached 35,000 meters, the temperature dropped to a completely different level, and even the blood lightning around Evan started to freeze. Evan narrowed his eyes when he felt his body starting to stiffen due to the cold and looked down. Not enough, Evan said after looking down, and used more power to cover himself in blood lightning. 40,000 meters, 45,000 meters. Soon, the layer of ice started to cover the blood lightning, and it became difficult for Evan to control it. But he gritted his teeth and continued to move until he reached the height of 50,000 meters. Once he was at the height of 50,000 meters, Evan looked down and used the Hawk's Eye skill to look at the turtle who was fighting against his shadow undeads. At first, the turtle was just defending, but now it started to attack using the water, and many shadow undeads were already killed by it. Evan didn't use his world essence to summon back the shadow undeads who were killed by the turtle, as he needed as much world essence as possible if he wanted to successfully kill the turtle. I can go even higher if I want to, but this height should be more than enough, Evan muttered when he saw the turtle fighting against his shadow undeads and stretched forward his hand. As he stretched his hand, carnage shot out of his shadow storage, and he caught it. Blood lightning started to cover the rifle, and the sinister aura around Carnage increased to a completely different level because of the bloodthirsty nature of blood lightning. Holding Carnage in his hands, Evan took a deep breath and his entire body started to glow with a blood-red color as blood lightning covered him entirely. Let's complete this Fu King trial and get out of here, Evan said in a cold voice and positioned his body at an upside angle. He held Carnage from the backside and positioned its muzzle towards the turtle who was just below him. Slowly, the glow of blood lightning covering his body started to increase, and Evan started to spin his body like a drill along with Carnage. Using his control over blood lightning, he slowly increased his spinning speed, and in just a few seconds, he was spinning at such a high speed that the space around him started to shake. Burrs, not enough. Even though the space around him was shaking, Evan wasn't satisfied. His eyes glowed with more lighting and he used temporal velocity to increase his agility by another 30%. WRRRR. The space around Evan made a strange sound and started to wrap and twist. A powerful pressure covered the sky, and even though Evan was nearly 50,000 meters high in the sky, the turtle still felt the dangerous aura that was coming out due to his actions. Feeling danger, the turtle lifted its head and looked at the sky. As it gazed upward, the turtle saw a large patch of sky that had turned blood red and was cracking with sinister blood lightning. Seeing the large patch of sky covered in blood lightning, a sense of doom engulfed its body. Feeling a sense of doom, the turtle wanted to go back inside the water, but before it could go back. Crackle, boom, it heard the sound of lightning crackling, followed by a booming explosion that shook the entire sky and saw a streak of blood. Red light spinning like a drill coming towards it like a missile. The speed at which the blood lightning drill came towards it was so fast that the only thing the turtle could do was pull back its head inside its tough shell to protect itself. The moment the turtle pulled its head inside its shell, CRCCCCCKKKK, the sound of grinding rang out throughout the surroundings as the Carnage's muzzle covered in blood lightning and spinning like a drill collided against the turtle's shell. Fu K. The bones in Evan's hand snapped the moment Carnage clashed against the turtle's tough shell, and his entire body started to ache. If not because of the indestructible effect of the growth link skill, Evan was sure that Carnage would have snapped into millions of pieces long ago. Feeling the pain coming from his hands, Evan gritted his teeth and used his world essence to increase the power of the blood lightning, resulting in an increase in his spinning speed. At the same time, he activated Sky Fall to increase his strength, and as a result, crack, crack, he heard the sound of something cracking and noticed cracks started to appear in the turtle's shell. Seeing the cracks, Evan's eyes glowed with blood lightning, and his spinning speed once again increased. Arg, break already, Evan shouted in a loud voice. In the next second, swish, the blood lightning drill pierced through the shell and entered the turtle's body. Roar, the turtle roared in pain as blood flowed out uncontrollably. After destroying its shell, Carnage pierced the turtle's back, allowing Evan to enter its body. Evan wanted to stop after entering the turtle's body, but he couldn't control his spinning speed, resulting in him tearing through the turtle's stomach from the inside and emerging from the other end. Roar, the turtle roared in pain as the water of the lake started to turn red due to the blood leaking out from its wound. The turtle was around 100 meters tall, so this kind of wound was very small compared to its giant body. Moreover, using the power of the lake, the turtle already started to heal the wound inflicted by Evan. Evan, who couldn't control his spinning speed and buried himself at the bottom of the lake, knew this fact as well. However, he wasn't worried because the moment he destroyed the turtle's shell and entered its body, the fate of the turtle was sealed. Necros now, Evan sent a message using his shadow senses, and the next second, two very small purple eyes opened inside the stomach of the turtle, and their size started to increase. Half of Evan's upper body was buried at the bottom of the lake, with most of his bones fractured and internal organs damaged. The impact of clashing against the turtle's tough shell by falling from a height of 50,000 meters was already very powerful, and since he used Sky Fall as well, it placed an even greater burden on his body, resulting in a powerful backlash. After sending a message to Necros using his shadow senses, Evan immediately used the death transfer skill to recover because he had started to lose consciousness due to his severe injuries. A dark purple light flashed around Evan's body, transferring all the damage he received to one of his shadow undeads. Once he healed himself, Evan pulled his body out from the bottom of the lake and quickly bolted toward the surface. As Evan moved towards the surface, he noticed that the water of the lake had turned a light shade of red at some point, with the smell of blood permeating the area. Soon, he emerged from the lake, and upon seeing the scene that welcomed him after emerging from the lake, a wide smile appeared on his face. So what if your outer defense is very high? There is nothing you can do if someone destroys you from the inside, Evan said to himself as he looked at the giant turtle floating on the surface of the lake with a lifeless look on its face. Yes, it was dead. Beside the dead turtle, stood Necros, whose entire body was covered in blood. Evan knew that it was impossible for him to kill the turtle using normal means because of its abnormally high defense and the unlimited world essence that it was receiving from the lake. After considering everything, the only way he could think of killing the turtle was to destroy its internal organs, which were not as tough as its outer defense. Deciding to break the turtle's shell by taking advantage of Carnage's indestructibility effect, Evan took Necros, who had used the size manipulation skill to shrink its body to the size of a mosquito to the sky. The reason he brought Necros along with him was because he knew that the way he was going to break the turtle's shell would be very dangerous, and he might not be able to properly control his body during the operation. The moment Evan entered the turtle's body after destroying its shell, Necros, who was with him, immediately separated from him and stayed inside its body, while Evan, who couldn't control his body, emerged outside by tearing through the turtle's stomach from the inside. Because Necros successfully stayed inside the turtle's body, everything became very easy. Evan simply ordered Necros to stop using the size manipulation skill, causing it to return to its normal size inside the turtle's stomach and tear its body from the inside. Even though the turtle's endurance was very high, it couldn't survive after all of its internal organs were destroyed. Evan looked at the small island where the frost vine was located and saw after the turtle's death, the water barrier covering it had disappeared. I can finally complete the second trial, Evan said to himself and flew towards the turtle's body floating in the middle of the lake. Although damaged, this shell should still be quite useful, Evan muttered and put away the black diamond-shaped shell along with the bloodied body of the turtle inside his shadow storage. After storing the turtle's body, Evan looked at the island and took a step forward. His body turned into a blur, and he instantly appeared at the edge of the island. After appearing at the island, Evan didn't immediately move towards the frost vine. Instead, he first sent one of his shadow undeads toward the vines to check for traps. Luckily, there were no traps on the island and his shadow undeads reached the frost vine without encountering any problem. After confirming it was safe, Evan took another step forward and appeared right beside the frost vine. The vine was around 5 meters long and deep blue in color. Upon closer inspection, Evan sensed a large amount of water energy and concentrated world essence inside it. Feeling a large amount of world essence inside the vine, Evan raised an eyebrow in surprise and used his spiritual senses to scan it. Upon scanning the vine using his spiritual senses, Evan found that the roots of the vine reached the very bottom of the island and were connected with the lake. Could it be that the turtle was receiving an unlimited supply of world essence from this vine? Evan wondered when he saw the connection between the vine and the lake. Although he was curious about the vine, he decided to collect it for the time being to complete the second trial and think about this matter later. The moment Evan collected the frost vine, the list of the herbs he received at the beginning of the second trial flew out of his pocket and hovered in front of him. Evan looked at the floating list with a curious expression and soon noticed the names of the 5 herbs on the list started to invert with each other, forming a strange rune on the paper. Evan raised an eyebrow in surprise when he saw what was happening, but he did not do anything and waited patiently. In less than a minute, the rune was completed, and as soon as it was finished, the paper flew towards Evan and attached itself to his body. Evan looked at the palm of his hand where the paper attached itself and saw it was seeping inside his hand and soon disappearing from his view. The second trial has been completed. The moment the paper seeped into his palm, Evan heard a voice inside his head, and his body started to glow with silver light. Evan turned around to look at the lake behind him, and in just a few seconds, he disappeared from the small island. What is this place? Evan asked himself in confusion as he found himself inside a stone room. The room was way bigger than the room where he had taken his first trial, and unlike the first room, which was empty, there were many things inside this room. On his right side, there was a bookshelf filled with hundreds of different kinds of books, all looking quite ancient. In front of him, he saw a dark bronze-colored alchemy cauldron. The cauldron's outer surface was engraved with strange runes, and just by looking at it, Evan could tell that it was not a normal thing. Upon looking to his left, he saw a small platform where 3 storage rings were placed. The platform was engraved with many runes, all of which were faintly glowing. Evan raised an eyebrow when he saw all of these things and didn't know what to do next. Just as he was wondering what he should do, the voice he heard during his first and second trials resounded inside his head. Collect your rewards to enter the third and final trial. Evan wasn't surprised when he heard the voice inside his head as he was already getting used to it, but the words that he heard definitely surprised him. Rewards, Evan muttered in a low voice, and his eyes lit up like stars. So these books, cauldron, and the storage rings are my reward for completing the second trial. Thinking about all the things in front of him, Evan was so excited that he was about to move towards the books, but he suddenly thought about something and summoned one of his shadow undeads. After summoning it, he ordered it to bring a book from the shelf to him. Better safe than sorry, Evan said to himself as he watched Shadow Undead moving towards the bookshelf. He didn't fully trust the voice that spoke inside his head, so although he didn't find any traps using his spiritual senses, he still decided to act carefully. Moreover, there was still the matter of Momin and the others. He didn't know what happened to them and why they were acting like puppets. What if they turn into puppets in this room after passing the first and second trials? Evan said to himself and raised his guard even more. He knew most people would let their guard down after hearing about rewards and would act carelessly, but he wasn't going to do that. I don't want to become a walking puppet like them, Evan muttered as he used his spiritual senses to look at the paper that seeped inside his hand at the end of the second trial. The only reason Evan wasn't bothered by this paper was because he knew that he could destroy it anytime he wanted using his primordial shadow energy or the world essence. If he had felt even the slightest threat from the paper, he would have destroyed it long ago. After reaching in front of the bookshelf, the shadow undead pulled out a book, but nothing happened. Evan looked at the book that the shadow undead pulled out and saw something written on its cover. Way of the Ancient Alchemy. Evan raised an eyebrow when he read the title and asked the shadow undead to pull out a few more books. The shadow undead followed Evan's order and pulled out a few more books from the shelf. Evan looked at the books carefully and noticed all of them were about alchemy, and most of them had the word, ancient, written on them. Is this ancient alchemy different from normal alchemy? Evan thought aloud, and seeing that the bookshelf was safe, he walked towards it and dropped all of the books inside his shadow storage. Amara, he said after putting all the books inside his shadow storage. I will check them out immediately, Amara answered in an excited voice when she heard Evan. From her tone, it was evident that she was excited about the new alchemy-related books. After putting away the books, Evan sent the shadow undead towards the cauldron. Similar to before, the shadow undead didn't find anything wrong with the cauldron. Confirming that the cauldron was also fine, Evan walked towards it. As he stopped in front of the cauldron, Evan felt a strange aura coming out of it. When he touched the cauldron, its information appeared in front of him, and Evan's heart nearly leapt out of his chest when he saw the information about the cauldron. Dark Phoenix Cauldron, low-level rank 4, a cauldron engraved with special runes specially created to perform the ancient alchemy. Holy Fu K. Evan couldn't help but swear when he saw the rank of the cauldron. Rank 4, this Fu King metal pot is a rank 4 artifact, Evan said in a shocked voice, feeling his head spinning. He took a few deep breaths to calm down, and when he regained his composure, he didn't know whether to feel happy or disappointed. He was happy that he received a rank 4 cauldron, but at the same time, he felt disappointed that it was a cauldron and not another artifact that he could use. Seriously, now I am feeling like I should also learn alchemy so that I can use this thing. Evan said with a shake of his head and looked at the information about the cauldron once again. A cauldron specially made to perform ancient alchemy, huh? Now Evan was 100% sure that whatever this ancient alchemy thing was, it was definitely different from normal alchemy. If it was normal alchemy, it could easily be performed in a normal cauldron, but since it needed a cauldron engraved with special runes, it was pretty obvious it was something different. I will get my answer once Amara reads a few books that I found earlier. Evan said to himself and sent the shadow undead towards the platform where the storage rings were. After the shadow undead confirmed there was nothing wrong with the platform, Evan walked towards the rings. He stopped in front of the platform where the rings were and picked up one of them. Teleporting you to the location of the third and the final trial. The moment Evan picked up one of the rings, he heard the voice inside his head, and before he could take the other two rings or complain, a white light flashed, and he disappeared from the room. Now this sh*t is getting on my nerves. Evan's irritated voice resounded in a completely dark space where not even a speck of light could be seen. He was sitting on the ground with an emotionless look on his face, but the aura emanating from his body was screaming that he was royally pissed. I think it's been more than 8 hours already, Evan said to himself as he calculated the time he had been trapped in the dark space. After being teleported away from the reward room, he found himself in this dark space. At first, he was on very high alert as, according to the voice he heard inside his head, it was the last trial, and he thought it would be quite dangerous. But even after waiting for 1 hour, nothing happened. Evan was quite confused because of this situation, so he started to explore the dark space, but to his disappointment, even after looking around for more than 3 hours, he did not find anything. It was as if he was thrown inside an endless world filled with nothing else but darkness. After not finding anything even after hours of searching, Evan sent some of his shadow undeads to look around, and the result was the same, and even his shadow undeads didn't find anything. According to the voice, I should have been teleported to the place of the last trial, so what the f*** is going on here? Evan grumbled in annoyance, getting irritated because of not being able to understand his situation. He took deep breaths to calm down his nerves and closed his eyes. After a few minutes, he opened his eyes and exhaled deeply. I just hope I won't be trapped in this shitty place for a long time, as I still want to explore other places of the tomb. Evan said with a sigh and took out a storage ring from his pocket. The storage ring he took out was the ring that he received in the reward room, and despite being trapped inside the dark space for more than 8 hours already, he hadn't checked out its contents because he was focused on finding a way to leave the place. Let's hope the things inside the ring will improve my mood and compensate me for the time I am wasting here, Evan said, and looked inside the ring using his spiritual senses. Upon looking inside the ring, Evan was taken aback because he was expecting the ring to be filled to the brim with rare things, but there were only 3 things inside it. I just hope these 3 things are not useless, Evan said while looking at a wooden chest, a small transparent glass ball flickering with purple light, and a dusty paper that looked like a map. Using his spiritual senses, Evan first took out the wooden chest from the ring. It looks like a treasure chest, Evan said with a weird look on his face as he looked at the silver-colored chest in front of him. Upon closer inspection, he noticed 2 runes engraved on the front side of the chest, both of which looked quite complex. Evan touched the chest and tried to open it, but to his surprise, the chest was locked and he couldn't open it. Evan raised an eyebrow when he wasn't able to open the chest, and before he could do anything further, the information about the chest flashed in front of his eyes. Ancient Alchemy Chest. A chest that can only be opened by using ancient alchemy. If you try to forcefully open the chest and the things inside it will self-destruct. Ancient alchemy again. Evan narrowed his eyes when he saw the information about the chest and rubbed his chin. Just an hour ago, he had asked Amara if she found anything about ancient alchemy through the books, but she said it would take her a few days to understand the content of the books, as there were hundreds of books and she first had to sort them out. So this chest is useless to me until Amara learns something about ancient alchemy, Evan said with a twitching mouth, and his mood turned even worse. He looked at the 2 other things inside the ring and took a deep breath. I swear if these 2 also turn out to be something similar to this chest that I can't use, I will definitely beat the sh*t out of the person who placed these things inside the ring. Evan said in a venomous voice as if he were talking about his worst enemy, and took out the glass ball, which was 5 centimeters in diameter. The moment he took out the glass ball, the entire dark place flashed with deep purple light for a second, forcing Evan to close his eyes. After a second, when he opened his eyes and saw the information about the glass ball, Evan's eyes opened wide in shock. Destruction Lightning Ball, mid-level rank 3, a lethal artifact that can shoot destructive lightning projectiles with a piercing effect. Looking at the rank of the small glass ball, Evan stuttered a little and his breathing became heavy. Just a few hours ago, he was feeling disappointed because of getting a rank 4 cauldron instead of something useful, so receiving a rank 3 artifact that he could use was making him very excited. He felt the power emitting from the small destruction lightning ball, and his body shuddered because of the heavy aura around it. Evan immediately wanted to try the power of the lightning ball, but he knew that in his current situation trying out the power of a mid-level rank 3 artifact was sheer foolishness. He was sure that even by using all of his world essence, he wouldn't be able to use even 10% of the artifact's power. Moreover, he was still unaware of his current situation, so he needed to preserve his world essence just in case someone attacked him. Damn, I really want to get out of here and try this baby, Evan said and looked at the dark space around him with irritated eyes. After a few seconds, he shook his head and put down the lightning ball. After putting down the rank 3 artifact, he looked at the last thing that was inside the ring. Let's hope this thing is also something awesome, Evan said in a low voice and took out the dusty paper from the ring. Evan took out the dusty paper from the storage ring, and just as he expected, it was a map. Is this a treasure map? Evan muttered in a curious voice and looked at the map. And the moment he looked at the map, his eyes opened wide in shock and a serious look appeared on his face. The map was divided into 3 parts and was very easy to understand. After looking at the map for a few seconds, Evan took out the map of the plain ground that Team Black created and compared it to the 3rd part of the dusty map. After comparing the maps for a few minutes, he took a deep breath and said in a trembling voice, This is definitely the map of the entire Tomb of the Ancient. The map Evan found in the ring was the map of the Tomb of the Ancient, and unlike the map created by Team Black, the map he found in the ring was of the entire tomb. From the third layer to the first, the map had all the details about the tomb. Unlike Team Black, who marked every single treasure or artifact that they found on the map Evan found in the ring only had 3 things marked on it. He didn't know about the 2 things, but one of the things that was marked on the map was something that could make anyone drool in excitement. Evan looked at the top part of the map that represents the first layer of the tomb and saw a cross mark with something written on top of it. Just by reading what was written on top of it, Evan's blood started to boil in excitement. Time liquid, he muttered in a low voice as he carefully looked at the words written on the map. Other than the time liquid, one more place was marked in the third layer, and when he read the words written above the marked place, for some reason, his entire soul trembled as if urging him to go there as soon as possible. Core altar. Evan muttered the words written on the marked location and felt a strange feeling growing inside his heart. A feeling of excitement, anxiety, and most importantly, a feeling of amusement, as if he just found something funny. What the hell is going on? Evan took a few deep breaths to calm down his boiling feelings and shook his head. His gaze lingered on the words, Core altar, for a few more seconds before he stopped looking at it and shifted his gaze to the area that represents the second layer of the tomb. On the map that represents the second area, the third place was marked, and Evan knew that place very well. Isn't this the place where the cave I entered is located? Evan muttered with a frown on his face and looked at the words written on top of the marked place. Octavius's nest. Evan's face turned strange when he saw what was written on the map as he couldn't understand what it meant by Octavius's nest. Wait a second. Suddenly, something clicked in Evan's mind and his eyes narrowed. If I remember correctly, Cedar told me that the terrain of the tomb never remains the same. Each time the tomb opens, its entire terrain changes randomly. Evan muttered and looked at the dusty map in his hands. If the terrain of the tomb changes randomly, then how is it possible for this map to be similar to the current terrain of the tomb? Just by looking at the condition of the map, Evan could tell that it was created a long time ago, and if it was created in the past, then how come the map matched the current terrain of the tomb that was randomly decided? Could it be that the person who made the map had the ability to see the future? Evan muttered with a strange look on his face and felt his head spinning. Just what the fuck is going on? First I got trapped in this shitty place, and now this map. Evan said while rubbing his eyebrows and felt a massive headache. He looked at the area that represents the third layer and saw there was no mark in the third layer. There was just a normal map of the third layer that shows the plain ground and other areas of the third layer. This is getting weird, Evan said with a sigh as he looked at the map in his hands. After looking at the map for a few minutes, Evan once again sighed and shook his head. His gaze lingered on the words, Core altar, for a few more seconds before he stopped looking at it and shifted his gaze to the area that represents the second layer of the tomb. On the map that represents the second area, the third place was marked, and Evan knew that place very well. Isn't this the place where the cave I entered is located? Evan muttered with a frown on his face and looked at the words written on top of the marked place. Octavius's nest. Evan's face turned strange when he saw what was written on the map as he couldn't understand what it meant by Octavius's nest. Wait a second. Suddenly, something clicked in Evan's mind and his eyes narrowed. If I remember correctly, Cedar told me that the terrain of the tomb never remains the same. Each time the tomb opens, its entire terrain changes randomly. Evan muttered and looked at the dusty map in his hands. If the terrain of the tomb changes randomly, then how is it possible for this map to be similar to the current terrain of the tomb? Just by looking at the condition of the map, Evan could tell that it was created a long time ago, and if it was created in the past, then how come the map matched the current terrain of the tomb that was randomly decided? Could it be that the person who made the map had the ability to see the future? Evan muttered with a strange look on his face and felt his head spinning. Just what the fuck is going on? First I got trapped in this shitty place, and now this map. Evan said while rubbing his eyebrows and felt a massive headache. He looked at the area that represents the third layer and saw there was no mark in the third layer. There was just a normal map of the third layer that shows the plain ground and other areas of the third layer. This is getting weird, Evan said with a sigh as he looked at the map in his hands. After looking at the map for a few minutes, Evan once again sighed and shook his head. There is no point in thinking about how this map can match the current terrain of the tomb. He said and looked at the area of the first layer, specifically speaking, the area where the core altar was marked. I need to get out of here. Evan said, and put away the map inside his shadow storage along with the ancient alchemy chest and the destruction lightning ball. After putting them away, he stood up and started to look for a way out once again. Unfortunately, even after 10 more hours, he didn't find anything that could help him escape from the dark place. Just what the fuck is this place? Evan shouted in an anger-filled voice and punched the ground, making the area around him shudder. Fuck it, if I can't find an exit, I will just destroy this entire place, Evan said in a cold voice, and was about to summon all of his shadow undeads. But just before he could summon his shadow undeads, all the participants have arrived. Starting the third trial, Evan heard the same voice inside his head, and his body began to disappear from the dark place. Evan was taken aback when he heard the voice, but he soon regained his senses and focused on the words that he heard. Participants, Evan thought and narrowed his eyes. Could it be that I will have to compete with other people to pass the third trial? The silver light around Evan intensified, and with a flash, he disappeared